Hey guys, it's Karina here with another video. I hope you guys are all doing well. So today I'm going to be talking about divorce. So it's a bit of a heavy topic today, so feel free to watch it another time when you're in the right mood. Divorce is something that I think we're all affected by in some shape or form, whether it's through family members or friends. Divorce happens a lot. I personally have never been married before, therefore I've never been divorced. But my parents are divorced, so I have experienced it secondhand. And it's really difficult experience. It's something you think would never happen. And you really do have to go through a grief process and grieve the relationship that was your parents, right? So it was a really intense time for me, and I really did have to grieve the relationship and what our family once was. And what made this experience difficult was I was in a religious program last year, and we had a week on marriage, and the way they presented it was pretty intense when they talked about divorce. They said that God allows for divorce, however, if you do get divorced, God will be very disappointed with you. So I remember being very confused. I'm like, is God disappointed with my parents? Is what they did godly? And I remember speaking to the speaker that week and just being so confused and crying, and I was just totally set off. And he told me that our family would be restored in some way. And to me that registered as my parents eventually getting back together, which I think was an unhealthy way of thinking, because the chances of that happening were very slim. And I think what I needed to do was face the reality and not have this false hope. So it really just started this unhealthy way of thinking that my family would be back together someday. And I believe that to an extent, but I don't think that's possible while we're here on earth. Maybe someday in heaven, but the fact is what happened, and I need to face that, and I need to grieve that. So I think it's really important that if your parents do get divorced, you have to face the reality, and you have to go through that grieving process. And I don't think it's necessarily healthy to have the hope that they will get back together. And if they do, that's great, but that's not the case for most relationships. So I think it's important that you do face the reality. So my personal beliefs about divorce is I think if your partner is in any way abusive, that is an absolute reason to get a divorce. I think that sometimes two people are just not meant to be, and it's not worth forcing the relationship. I think it's good to try to work through it with a counselor and see if you can move past your issues. However, if that doesn't work for a certain period of time, I think you need to be willing to let go of the marriage, as it's not worth your suffering or sacrificing your happiness. So now I'm going to talk about what the Bible says about divorce. So in Matthew 5:32 it says, "But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife except for the grounds of sexual immorality makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery." So the verse is essentially saying a man has a grounds to divorce his wife in any case of adultery, and whoever marries this woman commits adultery after this happens. So it's pretty much saying, like, even if your partner's abusing you, you don't have grounds for divorce. And that's pretty intense. So this is what Jesus supposedly said. And Paul, on the other hand, believed that if you had religious differences that were causing conflicts, that was ground for a divorce. So there's a bit of different beliefs here, and Paul had a bit of a less strict view of divorce. So that is the explanation for that verse, and as you can see, there's some contradictions between Jesus and Paul. Alright, so let's get into some more points on why I disagree with this verse. So first off, the Bible was written by a lot of men, and I believe that there's a lot of biases potentially in this verse. Men had a lot of biases back then and had a certain place in society, and they were more dominant in society, and they were seen as higher than women. So it's very possible that the men twisted the words potentially to fit what they believed rather than what Jesus taught. So my second point is it's hard to know whether Jesus actually said this. Again, with the interpretation, it can get very messy, and how the words and stories were passed along. Something could have easily been lost or misinterpreted, or there was human bias in the process. And my third point is marriage is very different now than it was back then. So for one thing, marriages back then were arranged marriages. And back then, you lived in a community, and the idea was that you lived in a community for social benefit, and your husband was your main source of income. So if Jesus' teachings on divorce are true, then maybe he was suggesting people don't get divorced so that they still have the benefit of that community and still have support and income. So that is potentially why Jesus was suggesting this. So I think at this point you need to take this verse into context of today. I think this is something so important when we read the Bible, is we need to acknowledge that this is from thousands of years ago, and what does this look like today, and how does this change our views? So despite what the Bible says about divorce, I believe that if your marriage is physically or mentally abusive, that is a grounds for divorce. I think the important question here is to ask, does divorce line up with God's character? And I think the answer to that question is no, divorce doesn't line up with God's character. God does not want you to stay in a marriage that is going to make you suffer. He wants you to flourish and be the best you can be. And he wants you to be able to serve him. And if you're in an abusive marriage and that's exhausting you, like, how are you supposed to have energy to be the child of God you're supposed to be and be the light to the world that you are supposed to be? So I just want to say, if you're struggling right now in your marriage, try to get help, try to see a counselor, and try to go through a process of questioning. Is this worth it? Am I happy? Am I suffering? What is going on? And try to get help from friends and counselors. I really recommend reaching out. And yeah, I hope this video is encouraging and it makes sense. If you have any questions, please let me know. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share this video. I hope you guys have a great week and know that if God put you to it, he will put you through it. Bye guys!